Welcome to Bill's Aviation Podcast, where your stories are our stories. I'm a general aviation pilot, aviation writer, airplane builder, avionics developer, test pilot, and general screw-up. All stories feature Joe and his merry band of miscreants. The purpose of these stories is to educate and entertain pilots. If you have a story you'd like to share anonymously, please contact me. Today's story is titled Smoke in the Cockpit, Adventures with Rental Planes. Joe and his wife Karen rented a Piper Warrior for an afternoon sightseeing trip down the Atlantic Seaboard. It was the first cool day of fall with a bit of nip in the air. Joe performed the pre-flight on the ratty, well-used Piper. While he did that, Karen turned her nose up at the sight of the Warrior with its faded paint, worn and stained interior that smelled of gas, oil, sweat, and bodily fluids. Pre-flight complete, Joe climbed in, followed by Karen. With the light cool breeze out of the north, the door was closed, latched, and checked for security. Taxiing to the end of the runway, checking the controls, ignition, carb heat, etc., all was normal, with no hint of what was about to happen. With over 7,000 feet laid out in front of Joe, half tanks and cool air, all 160 horses, reported for duty, and the plane jumped off the ground, or as well as could be expected. Climbing through 500 feet, Karen pulled out the knob marked cabin heat without notifying PIC Joe. 3 things happened instantly. 1 good thing and 2 not so good things. 1, heat started emanating from the heater vents. 2, smoke started emanating from the heater vents. And 3, Karen, all 5'3" of her petite body, started screaming louder than the screech of an F-18 on full afterburner. "We're on fire! We're gonna die! Get me on the ground now!" Those are the polite comments she made in that instance of sheer panic and terror. Joe immediately declared an emergency on the common traffic advisory frequency and turned downwind at 500 feet. The entire time, Karen continued to scream at the top of her lungs. Joe was really impressed at the volume emanating from such a small person and was thankful for the isolation feature on the Warrior's intercom. Joe also started to wonder how long it would be until the fire started melting the plastic behind the panel, and if his blue jeans would protect his legs until he got back on the ground. He also wondered which would happen first, they land on the ground or Karen stop screaming. A quick turn to base and final, where Joe turned off the master switch to try to put out the fire. Joe landed the airplane with the still screaming passenger on his right, pulled the mixture to kill the engine, and turned off the fuel before the plane stopped rolling. Joe had his answer. The plane was stopped on the runway, the door opened, and Karen continued to yell at the top of her lungs. Wow. As it turns out, Joe was the first person to fly the plane after an oil change where the engine wasn't test run before putting it back on the line, waiting for the next unsuspecting renter. The cause of the smoke was close to a barrel of oil that disappeared into the heater muff and waiting for some unsuspecting passenger to use the cabin heat. Joe swears he suffered permanent hearing damage from Karen's screaming. Lesson learned: when renting a plane, ask questions about when the last maintenance was performed, what kind of maintenance it was, and if anyone has flown the airplane since then. Thank you for listening, and if you enjoy what you heard, please share the story, hit the like button, and subscribe.